plenary session. I want to thank all of you for, first of all, coming to this conference and bringing your wisdom and your strategies and your passion and your beauty to this conference. Like, organizing conferences is not always fun, but you have made this a wonderful experience that I am in a moment of insanity considering repeating. And it's all because of the wonderful people who have come and had the conversations that I could only have dared to imagine before this moment. So this session is really important to me. It is a session that we put together with the members of Reach Coalition, which is our group that meets every Wednesday nights from 5:30 to 8 p.m. on Tennessee's death row at Riverbend Maximum Security Institution, Unit 2. And we've been working in 3 subcommittees with, who is we? We is a group of people in the front row here, volunteers from the community, many of whom are involved in the philosophy department here at Vanderbilt University, who have been coming into the prison with me to meet with 10 or 12, if we're lucky, men who are sentenced to death on Tennessee's death row. We've been working in 3 different subcommittees for the last few months. A subcommittee on death penalty law, a subcommittee on medical issues in prisons, and a subcommittee on cycles of violence and abuse. And so we're going to give you 3 presentations that were developed in conversation and collaboration in the unit itself, but the statements are written by the guys inside for the most part. So this conference began as a project of Reach Coalition. Way back last summer when we were really new at this group, we met and we decided we need a name. We've been meeting for about 3 months, and we've been reading various texts and discussing them, such as we began with Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow, and we read some Martin Luther King, and we read Ruth Gilmore on Mother's Rock, and we read some stuff from Restorative Justice, and we were starting to kind of get into the swing of things and starting to formalize a little bit and starting to work on projects. So we had a brainstorming session, and the very top of our list for this brainstorming session of projects that we could do was an art exhibition. And I want to draw your attention to the piece that you see on the table right there, which is by Ron Cothern, which is called No, You're Out of Order, which is a phone booth that he made out of scraps of foam board and little things, pieces of wood that he gathered around the prison to draw attention to the prison phone justice campaign and the exploitative contracts that private prison companies have to offer services to people who are in prison trying to keep in touch with their loved ones on the outside. So I encourage you to take a look at that, and also at the pamphlet that we have just leaning up against the blackboard there, which is the art card from our art exhibition here at Surratt Gallery, where we had artwork from not only the men in our group, but also they practiced what we call in-reach. They reached into the other prisoners who are not able to join groups like ours because they're on lockdown for 22.5 to 23.5 hours a day. So we had artwork from guys that we've never met, but who are in their cells drawing, painting, and creating some form of beauty that they wanted to share with the outside world. So I encourage you to take a pamphlet from the art show as well. I brought over the comment box from our art show because I think probably the favorite element of the art show for the guys inside was the comment box. Every week before we went in, I would go and I would empty all the comments and just photocopy them, one for each pod, and they would read the comments that people had made after viewing their art. And so after this presentation, if you have anything at all that you want to share, even if it's just hello, please put it in the comment box, and I'll bring that in next week to share with the guys inside. What else do I have to say? I wanted to read a statement from the group that was pressed into my hands just last weekend. Actually, last Thursday, a couple of days ago, seems like when we went into Unit 2 with Joy James, and Mark Taylor, and Sarah Tyson, who was an original member of our group. And the guys inside are working to formalize the structure of Reach Coalition as an inmate organization that will have kind of autonomy within the prison. And they developed a statement of purpose for this group. So I want to read the statement of purpose to let you know in their own words what they take to be the purpose of our group. The document says, our purpose is to develop a coalition comprised of death row prisoners and volunteers who seek to educate themselves and the public about crime, punishment, and responsibility. It's our individual responsibility to take the first step towards making a positive contribution to our community, whether that's within the prison setting or within our larger community. In that regard, we shall work with volunteers and prison administrators to build a sustainable, transformative, justice-based community model. Our efforts will be influenced by models such as the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the participatory education principles of the Highlander Research and Education Center, to mention a few, in a wide range of materials and subject matters. We will always integrate paradigms that embrace and cultivate diversity and inclusion. Our in-reach and outreach educational objectives will be achieved through sharing our personal journeys, guest speakers and teachers, group dynamics, artwork, and creative writings. So that's what Reach Coalition is all about. So before I call members of the subcommittees to come in and share the work that they have developed in collaboration with the insiders, I just want to give you a few facts for people who are not from Tennessee about the death penalty and death row in Tennessee. So there are currently 80 men and 1 woman on death row in Tennessee. We've executed 341 people in this state since 1916. After capital punishment was suspended across the U.S. from 1972 to 1976, Tennessee was the last southern state to resume executions. And we are the only southern state to have abolished the death penalty for murder at any point in our history. And that was from 1915 to 1919. At that time, the death penalty still remained in force for convicted rapists. But we did abolish the death penalty in this state for murder for 4 years. Since 2000, 6 people have been executed in Tennessee. Robert Glencoe, Sedley Alley, Phil Workman, Darrell Holton, Steve Henley, and Cecil Johnson. So we didn't execute anyone from 1972 to the year 2000. And that is a record that we can be proud of and that we can build on and try to get back to. Right now, Tennessee is not executing anyone because we don't have legal access to the anesthetic in the 3-drug protocol. But there is a case in court, and once that access to that drug is sorted out, that impediment to executing people will be removed. And there are currently 10 prisoners on death row who have exhausted their legal appeals and who would be eligible for a death sentence, for an execution date, once that practical impediment to execution is worked out. So this is a very real issue for us, and it's one of the many reasons why I think it's important to share the voices of people on death row. Okay, so I want to call the members of the Death Penalty Law Committee up to share their presentations and to introduce themselves. So this is the members of the Subcommittee on Death Penalty Law include Gary Cohn, David Duncan, Owen Hutchison, Katie Kelly, Derek Quintero, and Rebecca Tubell. And as they present this work, I'm just going to flip through and show you an image of the face of the person and also some of their artwork as their work is being read.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here. My name is Rebecca Tubell. I'm a 6th-year student in the philosophy department here at Vanderbilt, and I've been involved with Reach Coalition for the past year. And today we seek to represent the subcommittee on death penalty law in Tennessee. According to this subcommittee, identifying the incoherence and the instability of Tennessee law's own internal dictates regarding the death penalty is to be able to expose the system's flaws and to use them against itself. And although we also discussed in our meetings the potential worries that might accompany this effort, what it means to try to remedy the legal system's flaws regarding the death penalty, could this further justify and cement the very norms of imprisonment and execution that drive the system in the first place, today we really do seek to try to represent their voices, and also to ask what that means. What does it mean for us to be authorized to speak on their behalf, and to think about these questions as well. Hopefully you can hear me at the back. What was that? Oh. Okay. Sorry. Whoops. Sorry about that. Okay. So, our subcommittee was charged with the task of detailing the unconstitutionality and unfairness within the legal processes utilized to convict and then sentence to death each of the imprisoned members of the REACH coalition. While we believe these issues can be found in other states' death penalty schemes, we focus on Tennessee, where we are intimately familiar with its inner workings. First, as a matter of incoherence, the Tennessee Death Penalty Statute, Public Acts 1977, defines 2 or more types of first-degree murder, and this violates the Tennessee Constitution. We know this because Article 2, Section 17 of the Tennessee Constitution states, in part, that, quote, no bill shall become a law which embraces more than one subject, end quote, which meaning that there can only be one type of crime listed in a proposed bill. However, one code of this statute lists 15 different ways of defining first-degree murder, violating Article 2, Section 17 of the Tennessee Constitution. Despite this obvious flaw, TCA 392402 is still a valid bill, and no state court has directly announced that Tennessee's death penalty statute is unconstitutional, although it has been well publicized that the death penalty system is flawed or broken. So this is the first kind of Tennessee law incoherence point that our subcommittee wants to bring to your attention. Second, we are here to tell you that the Tennessee citizens, whom were jurors in death penalty cases, were misled to believe that the state's death penalty scheme was fair. These trials were not fair because the information on which these jurors based their verdicts was neither complete nor accurate. So why was the information incomplete and inaccurate? Because Tennessee does not, in fact, require prosecutors to release to the defense all the evidence they gathered in their investigation. The prosecutors decide what is materially relevant to the defense's case and divulge only that particular information. When asked by the defense if they've released all the evidence, the prosecutor's catch-all phrase is that there is nothing of an exculpatory nature left in their files. The defendant, the courts, and the juries then have no other choice but to believe the prosecutors. And clearly, given their relative freedom in determining what is and is not included, it should come as no surprise to us that many prosecutors will lie or withhold exculpatory evidence. In light of this, we should not be surprised to hear Judge Gilbert Merritt's recent statement that, quote, the greatest threat to justice and the rule of law in death penalty cases is state prosecutorial malfeasance. Merritt continues, quote, there was some type of prosecutorial misconduct in 7 of the 8 Tennessee cases he reviewed in his years on the bench. So we have a number of deep injustices on the technical level of how people are being sentenced. So what can be done about this type of injustice? Normally, the first chance a defendant has to prove that a prosecutor withheld exculpatory evidence is at the state post-conviction stage. For those who don't know, post-conviction is a legal process that allows the defendant to file suit to prove that he or she did not receive a constitutionally sound trial, and it's the first opportunity where a defendant has a legal right to fully access a prosecutor's entire file on his or her case. So here would seem to lie a promising opportunity for defendants to expose the potential injustices of their trials. Problematically, however, this stage is also plagued by unjust process, including prosecutorial misconduct and ineffective assistance of counsel at the trial or direct appeal. The first line of any constitutionally adequate defense is effective counsel. Attorneys working death penalty cases currently have to be appointed by a local judge from a list of attorneys the Tennessee Supreme Court determines to meet a certain standard of excellence. But what is troubling is that this currently utilized attorney list was crafted to appease the federal legislators who passed the 1995 Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act. This act limits what state prisoners can litigate if they choose to file an appeal based upon a state court conviction in the federal court. So one of the designs of this federal limiting scheme advances that if any state wishes to opt into this process, the states have to develop a process that provides constitutionally adequate counsel. Tennessee, notwithstanding its attorney list, has still not qualified to opt into the federal habeas corpus limiting scheme. Prior to the formulation of this Tennessee Supreme Court qualified attorney list, local judges had unbridled discretion in appointing counsel. Many of those appointed to represent death penalty cases wouldn't even qualify for the current attorney list, and for the ones who were appointed, the compensation rates were so low that they couldn't maintain their normal caseload and work a time-consuming capital case. It wasn't until the mid-90s that attorneys were able to get their hourly pay rates increased to something close to the breaking-even point. So in short, the quality of representation was as shabby as the pay scale was. As clearly stated in the TBA report, quote, Tennessee has historically resolved conflicts between the Treasury and the fundamental rights of the accused in favor of the state's Treasury. And this is representative of a kind of economics versus justice dilemma. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. At this point, a trial judge can opt to appoint a public defender to represent a capital defendant. But the problem with this is that most of the public defender's offices were and continue to be overwhelmed by the ratio of clients to attorneys. Consider, for instance, the former 23rd Judicial District Public Defender, Ship Weems, in March 2003, he testified in a death penalty post-conviction case. He stated that in the short time between his office's creation in 1987 and a death penalty trial he represented in 1991, his office maintained an average of 800 cases per attorney per year, 9 of them death penalty cases. This size of a workload rate is normal in Tennessee public defender offices. Such heavy caseloads effectively render all the offices into plea bargain machines, basically, because they do not have the time or other resources to do anything else but pressure clients to plead guilty without any sort of investigation. Weems continued that his office was so overwhelmed that he made a decision to eliminate the only criminal investigator slot and fill it with another attorney. Weems further testified that there was no one to investigate guilt or innocence and that the local judges would not appoint him a guilt investigator because they knew that the legislature had given his office one upon its creation. He also noted that after having made the judges aware of the caseload and resource dilemmas, the judges still continued to appoint more cases to his office. However, I suppose it is worth noting that the judge did donate reams of typing paper to his office, and an assistant district attorney gave him a glass jar to take up donations. The reality is, in Tennessee, appellate courts very rarely reverse convictions based upon a lack of investigation or conduct of a trial prosecutor or judge. In only 12 cases from 1979 to 2004 did the Tennessee Court of Criminal Appeals find ineffective assistance of counsel based upon lack of preparation, lack of investigation, or failure to object to evidence at trial. Even Tennessee's Attorney General contributes to the problem by continuously, in Judge Merritt's words, quote, arguing that all the trials had been procedurally proper and the defendants had been ably represented at trial, end quote. What normally occurs then is that the state court appellate judges, all of whom are elected, uphold the vast majority of convictions, finding all errors committed as harmless. This puts the burden of proof on the federal court judges, who then have to wade through the multitude of state court errors and do what justice should have required the state court judges to do, uphold the integrity of the rule of law. This is why most of the reversals of convictions or sentences of death occur in federal court. The Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals has repeatedly and soundly admonished Tennessee to correct the manner in which its courts rule on death penalty cases. In Merritt's 2002 speech, he stated, quote, death penalty trials are designed to convict indigent defendants. Merritt continued that the reason almost one-half of the 156 death sentences imposed in Tennessee since 1979 are overturned by federal courts was due to pervasive, ineffective trial counsel statewide. Prosecutors and police failed to turn over exculpatory evidence, and there was a great tendency for state appellate courts to find that any error that did occur was harmless. Merritt further claims that, quote, prosecutors and their associations effectively run the criminal justice system, and any judge or judges who dare to oppose them were defeated during election cycles by the law enforcement community led by local district attorneys. What this shows is that the prosecutors know that the current system is slanted in their favor, and they don't want to fix it, even though it's unfair and unreliable. What is further troubling is that study after study has been completed, with all of them calling for an independent body to create fairness in the death penalty process. And all of the state's legal entities who can correct the problem are refusing to participate. As a result of Judge Merritt's 2002 speech, the president of the Tennessee Bar Association asked the board to examine if it was doing all it could to provide effective representation. The TBA's Board of Governors charged the committee on October 21st of 2003 to explore whether our system is providing effective assistance of counsel and to make recommendations on ways in which representation can be improved. The TBA has recommended that an independent body had to be created to remove the court's appearance of conflict of interest in its roles as administrator and as a final arbiter of closely related legal matters. Once again, the Tennessee Supreme Court refused to create an independent body to oversee matters regarding the uniform standards for appointment and evaluation of attorneys and expert services. The REACH Coalition's position is that the current criminal justice scheme utilized in Tennessee courts produces unreliable convictions and sentences. We, the members of the REACH Coalition, wish to make the following 6 recommendations. First, whether as a group or in individual conversations, we agree with most of the recommendations in the Tennessee Bar Association's 2004 report. That is, we agree that Tennessee courts should be in line with the American Bar Association guidelines as approved by the United States Supreme Court. We need the creation of entities that are independent from the state's judiciary to oversee the appointment and performance of counsel and expert services in capital cases. Secondly, the only exception we do have to the TBA 2004 report is where we wish for all capital murder cases to be handled by the public defender offices. They wish. The report does. We don't. Even if the American Bar Association guidelines were adopted, it would be almost impossible to keep a public defender's caseload within the acceptable range. We would suggest that no capital cases should be handled by the public defender's offices. Instead, we would suggest that there should be created an independent office specifically for capital trial litigation, just as is done now with the state post-conviction office where only death penalty cases are handled. Third, we want an open district attorney file law. They are supposed to prosecute for the truth and not a conviction. In that vein, their hands should always be open. Guilt should be contained in the evidence and not risked on the subterfuge or withholding relevant evidence. The presumption of innocence is supposed to always trump everything else in a trial prosecution. Fourth, we would like to ask the state appellate courts to start utilizing presumed prejudice rulings to help bring the conduct of prosecutors in line with constitutional requirements. We've often been told that where there's no respect for the rule of law, surely tyranny will be found. We are asking that the prosecutors will be held liable to the law just like everybody else. Fifth, we are asking the Tennessee appellate courts to start overturning cases based upon errors regarding an attorney's lack of preparation, lack of investigation, and errors in the trial court that are clearly not harmless. It is our opinion, backed by several Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals rulings, that the harmless error rule is overused by the state appellate courts. Lastly, we are asking that judges be disciplined and removed from the bench who have a continued pattern of being pro-prosecution and anti-defendant. There are a multitude of complaints that have been on file about this, supported by transcripts and proceedings. So what can we do on the outside in the public to curtail these massive injustices? As aforementioned, the misuse of the laws and regulations in criminal courts are being done by elected officials. The most important thing we can do is to vote. Check candidates' records, ask about fairness in courts rather than toughness. Vote in midterm and local elections. Secondly, we must get our voices out to those elected officials. Regardless of your home state, communities must pull together to create a voice that is heard. Express appreciation for justice served, demand justice where there is none. After all, it is always our taxpayer dollars that continue to be wasted on justice not served.
Thank you so much. Now I want to call members, and Olin Hutchison was on that committee too. Now, when I said that we developed these presentations collaboratively with the guys inside, what I meant was they schooled us on the law, and they wrote all of that, and they gave it to us. And we met to develop the presentations collaboratively, and we learned about death penalty law, we learned about constitutional law, we learned from, the experts themselves, the jailhouse lawyers who had come into the system often with just a GED or no GED, and taught themselves, because their lives are on the line, about constitutional law, about case law, about politics, about all of this. And so we are in the process of learning from them. So now I want to call the Subcommittee on Cycles of Violence, come on, which includes Abu Ali Abdurrahman, Lisa Gunther, that's me, Carmela Hill Burke, Akil Jackie, Harold Wayne Nichols, and Danica Ross. And so Carmela and I are going to give the presentation on this. I'll stand over here and then I'll come over, because I want to.
Okay, sorry. My name is Carmela, and it's my honor to read this amazing piece called The Changing Climate by Abu Ali Abdurrahman. In today's world, especially in this country, we mistakenly overlook the principal cause of violence, domestic abuse. Until a sincere attempt is put forth to find meaningful solutions to domestic violence, whether in the confines of the home, the public, or the penal system, violence in general will continue to escalate and the number of people being affected will increase. Domestic violence includes, but is not limited to, violence against women, child abuse, verbal demeaning assaults, rape, racism, sexism, corporal punishment, capital punishment, and male-on-male violence. The preamble of the United States Constitution declares that every person born within this country has a fundamental right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It states, "We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity." But a person who is born into a hostile environment is denied this domestic tranquility and set up for failure. What sort of future is open to those who have grown up without the space for a healthy development or habilitation? What is habilitation? It is a treatment to make suitable, to educate or train, to adjust, to support the habits that will allow a person to function well in society. Surgeon General Everett Koop, the Surgeon General for Ronald Reagan's administration, understood the connection between domestic violence, the lack of habilitation, and an effective prison system. He tried to explain, quote, "If we revisit and analyze those circumstances which create domestic violence, the conclusion would lead one to believe that the Department of Corrections should transform itself and become more therapeutic in nature," end quote. His argument is based on the psychological makeup of the people this country incarcerates. The majority of people who are involved with criminal activity are not people who were born into an environment considered a nice place to live. Almost everyone incarcerated is from hostile environments where you become a victim of circumstance. This is no new news. The problems that lead to violence have never been debated to the point where programs are designed to habilitate. Today's criminal justice system is still using the old, ineffective rehabilitation programs or none at all. The idea of rehabilitation was meant to help a person to readjust into society after a period of imprisonment, to make fit again and to restore. But if there is no prior balance to restore, then the project of rehabilitation is doomed to fail. How can a person be brought back to a healthy and productive condition when they developed in a violent environment that thrives on anarchy? Without the support of habilitation, a person can become delusional. And once a person is in a delusional state, what chance does that person have if there is no person to trust around to show that there is another way? Based on our knowledge of what has not worked, we should consider transforming the present penal institutions into therapeutic institutions where habilitation becomes a reality. It must be understood that obsessive anger, hate, and phobia are the primary characteristics of the vast majority of the incarcerated. From our observation, if we continue to ignore the sickness amidst us and do not offer the space for habilitation, punishment alone will only harden the hearts of those who have grown up without it. This will take much more than words or a slogan of getting tough on crime. We need to take action to transform our system of punishment and rehabilitation into a place of healing and habilitation. Regardless of the shade of their skin or their creed, if the people in need of habilitation do not feel our sincerity, the system as it stands will aid in destroying them, as it has helped to destroy so many before them. We were taught to hate and discriminate as well as not to compromise. We learn by example that it's okay to harm one another. But the cycles of domestic violence must be brought to an end. These ills are affecting each of us, whether you are black or white, agnostic or atheist, Catholic or Hebrew. Some of us sit back and watch while the confused, the despaired, and the abandoned fall prey to unforeseen traps. If we do not participate in the solution together, no legislative body and no set of ill-conceived threats will stop the violence which most of us have experienced and endured. We all have the obligation to those who are troubled, and we have the ability to help each other. Thank you for your attention and time.
So, I'm going to be reading a statement called Closing the Revolving Door by Harold W. Nichols. How can I tell you that this revolving door prison system is costing too high a price, the lives of our children? I can tell you about one of those children, a boy who began life in an abusive home where punishment meant being beaten until the blood ran and being tied up, forced to watch his sister suffer as well. This boy knew love in the time spent with his mother and his sister. But this was short-lived. Just after his 10th birthday, this boy's world was turned upside down. His mother passed away. This young boy, with help from his sister, out of love for their mother, set out to help the orphanage, which was run by the church of which his family were members. This orphanage used S&H green stamps to allow the children to get Christmas presents. A contest was run to see who could raise the most stamps, and the winner would win a new bicycle. This young boy, knowing nothing about how this would soon affect his life, raised all the stamps he could, and in September won the bicycle. In November, the boy's sister somehow found the strength and courage to tell someone what was happening in the home. The system was alerted to the abuse, but instead of addressing the problems of the family, they gave the father the option of going to prison or giving up the children. By December, the boy and his sister were in the orphanage, using the very stamps they had raised. This boy's story is typical of the prison system at work. The system is often made aware of the problems that exist early in someone's life, but does nothing to render the help that is needed. In this case, the abuser went free, the little boy punished, which set his feet on a path towards the revolving door. Locked away in the orphanage where the beatings continued, separated from his entire family, including his only sister because the girls' home was on the other side of town, The boy spent those years feeling as if he was nothing, unwanted even by his own family. Prison works the same way. Instead of offering early treatment, the individual is locked away, treated as worthless, less than nothing. What happened to that boy? Well, after years of separation, he was returned home to live with a father who had not only not changed, but now no longer wanted his son, and contacted the orphanage telling them to keep the boy. He didn't want him. The father did not want his son to go to school. Instead, he wanted his son to get a job and pay rent. He would not provide the things his son needed. But the boy was now a teenager, better able to provide for himself, and he worked to pay for the things he needed, such as books, clothes, and transportation. How does society treat someone who, after being treated like nothing, is returned to live among them? Most people know prison does not prepare an individual for society, so they treat those who have been released in the same way as the father treated his son. Society makes it clear that they do not want the ex-con living in their neighborhoods, and seldom does society give an ex-con an opportunity to better themselves. Such a system is not operated for justice nor for corrections. Instead, it is operated by department officials and politicians who, under the guise of being smarter on crime, band together to create a system based on a prison-for-profit scheme which only benefits those in power. Let's be smarter on crime instead of paying billions for prisons to warehouse our youth after a crime. Invest those tax dollars in our youth and assist them before they turn to crime. Government has not implemented a system of early treatment because to do so would mean an end to prisons for profit. It would also mean they would be exposed as having created for profit the revolving door society. Who am I to tell you these things? I was that young 10-year-old boy who I told you about, and I'm telling you these things because I've been through the system's revolving door. I think back to my childhood in the orphanage, debased, separated, and isolated. What if there had been a system of early treatment that would have offered help instead of separation, understanding instead of isolation? Where would I be now? I know where I am. I'm again debased, separated, and isolated. But instead of dreaming of home as I did when I was 10 and in the orphanage, I'm 52 years old and now sit in a prison cell awaiting my time to die on Tennessee's death row. Just as sure as I am here, I know right now there is a child somewhere asking, why me? What have I done wrong? And needing only to be loved. It is too late for me, but please do not let it be too late for that child too. Would you prefer a system that will answer that child's pleas, or a system that will turn its back and lie in wait for that child to make the wrong turn down the path to the revolving door? If you want to close the prison's revolving door and save the lives of our children, take an active role in your community, in the state, and in this country. Reach out to lawmakers, reach all the way to Congress and to the White House, and tell them enough is enough. We will no longer stand idly aside and watch while those we elect to represent us profit off the lives of our children. It's your decision.
Okay, we'd like to end our subcommittee's presentation with a poem by Akil Jahi, and it's entitled, How? How can we just sit back and watch? How can we say, I love them, and let them fall prey to a broken society every day? How can we say, my sister, my brother, my mother, my father, no matter what your ethnicity? How can we forget? The mere power of love can uplift the spirit and heal all hearts. How do we reverse a traumatic cycle? Understand the true meaning of compassion. Love your children. Love and respect your sisterhood and brotherhood. Do not betray them. Give them the key to life. How can we not remember? In order to fix a problem, we must find the root of it and start there, without passing the blame. We are all suffering as one body. How do we change it? By planting seeds of love and knowledge, which will grow from generation to generation, no matter how young or old you are. How long do we keep quiet? When we can see that the same disfigured look upon their faces because compassion was never given or taught in their lives in the first place. We are obligated to restore that which has been destroyed, just as we are obligated to preserve and rebuild our lives and our community.
So now I want to call the Subcommittee on Medical Issues, which includes Jeff Adelsberg, Ron Cawthorn, Kenneth Ortiz Henderson, Donald Middlebrooks, Andrea Pitts, Sandy Skeen, and St. Louis for Paris Morris.
It's on there. Is that the image? Hi, I'm Andrea Pitts. And so for the past year, our subcommittee has been focused on improving medical conditions in Riverbend Maximum Security Institution. And so among the projects that we've taken up are a suicide prevention workshop partnered with the Family and Children's Services of Nashville, wherein we brought in some folks to help train insiders to become attentive to the warning signs of potential suicide attempts and to figure out ways to prevent suicide. Another proposal has been an ID bracelet proposal. And so the current healthcare system at Riverbend doesn't use a medical ID bracelet program, which is standard in most hospitals and healthcare clinics. And so without this type of program, this could lead to the potential for misdiagnosis, under or over treatment, and the inability for first responders, who are usually guards, to recognize the chronic and pre-existing conditions and allergies of those who are suffering or in need. And so our most recent proposal then will be a phone tree advocacy network that we'll talk about at the close of our presentation. So.
So I'm just going to go through a brief structure of, just give you the structure of today's presentation. So the first thing that we're going to do is read testimony about a recent episode of medical neglect from Donald Middlebrooks, who is a member of REACH Coalition. We're going to display a drawing by Kenneth Ortiz Henderson with commentary on how the medical conditions in prison are reflected in his art. And third, we'll introduce Ron Cawthorn, the leader of our most recent project. Then before we discuss that project, we'll read a critical perspective by Faris Morris, aka St. Louis, about the obstacles to the recent initiatives of the Medical Conditions Group and REACH Coalition as such. And we'll conclude by discussing our phone tree initiative and how everyone here can get involved.
Okay, so first a statement from Donald Middlebrooks. Quote, "My name is Donald Middlebrooks. I've been on death row for 25 years. 24 of that 25 years has been without anyone on the outside for me to call when I need medical treatment. Several months ago, I had a seizure during my sleep. Another inmate pushed his emergency light to get security staff into the cell area to give me aid. Security staff, instead of rendering me aid, stood on my cell door for 30 minutes watching me as I injured myself. Being an incarcerated person, I am 100% reliant upon security to inform medical of my need for medical treatment, and 100% reliant upon medical staff to provide me with medical care. Needless to say, I and many of my co-incarcerated personnel have medical needs or have had such needs go unattended for months. One of my most recent resulted from my seizure. After my seizure, I started having trouble sleeping. I reported to medical my lack of sleep. This continued for 7 days. On day 6, I reported walls moving in my cell, yet still I received no assistance. On day 7, a little over a month ago, I made a rope, went upstairs, tied it to the railing, and jumped off. The lack of medical care and having no one to turn to had become too much for me to handle. I have noticed a big difference in the medical care for those inmates who have regular visits and family, and those like myself who have no one on the outside. I've had seizures since I was 20 years old. I am now 51, and the seizures have not changed. Only my freedom to provide for my own medical care changed when I became incarcerated." End quote.
Okay, now we're going to go to Kenneth Ortiz Henderson, and we're going to talk about this pencil sketch, which is the image that's on the conference posters. So this pencil sketch I composed is entitled Solitary Confinement. The concept for this particular sketch pertains to how inhumane, cruel, and degrading solitary confinement can be to an individual. Such conditions can be psychologically detrimental to a person. The person seen in this pencil sketch is experiencing feelings of depression, loneliness, despair, and claustrophobia. The reason his body appears to be blending in with the brick wall in the background is because he cannot psychologically cope with the circumstances, and he is psychologically becoming a part of his environment. These feelings of depression, loneliness, despair, and claustrophobia may intensify even more for a person in confinement who experiences medical neglect from the prison's medical staff and security staff members. There have been numerous incidents wherein persons who are incarcerated constantly begged and pleaded for the assistance of the prison's medical staff. After continuous attempts to get help through filing sick call forms, sending inmate request forms to the appropriate staff members, or filing grievance forms as a last option to get help, the individuals were left with the psychological feeling of hopelessness, despair, and helplessness. For any of the people who experience agony and pain as part of their medical problems, these psychological feelings of hopelessness intensify. Such medical neglect of a person's needs can cause that person to become a victim of psychological and emotional abuse. The individual may also develop problems such as anxiety, fearfulness, and difficulty in sleeping, and even thoughts of suicide. The individual may feel that suicide is the only way to get away from all the agony, pain, sickness, suffering, and medical neglect he is experiencing. Okay, so we're going to try to respond to some of these issues in our next project, and I'm just going to introduce Ron Cawthorn. He writes, I have worked on prison conditions for 26 years, and there are currently no legal avenues that can replace a broken system in a timely manner for those in need of care. Only you can bring about just medical care to a world that is often hidden from the view of individuals with a voice. He continues, it's simple, easy, and you can feel confident that you've improved the quality of a prisoner's life that without you could never happen. In the making, our next initiative is strictly to provide prisoners with assistance in receiving emergency medical care. There's no other source at this time that provides any service of this nature. It's a grassroots program that needs volunteers today.
However, before we discuss Ron's next proposal, we have a statement about some potential obstacles that the REACH Coalition currently faces, written by Ferris Morris, aka St. Louis. Quote, REACH Coalition, an impressive group newly introduced to the Unit 2 atmosphere, has already taken great strides to make a positive stand against unsightly living conditions and inadequate care for the welfare of inmates who reside in Unit 2. Let not their efforts be in vain or without merit. The problem remains that there is a lack of respect from the very community of incarcerated persons on death row that REACH Coalition is trying to stand for. There is a syndrome or a plague for prison politics in this unit suffered by a majority of incarcerated individuals. Perhaps it is the hardcore policy structures that impute coerced mental digression into the community, and the sacrificial measures are too great and impose too extreme deprivative results. But REACH Coalition can only be as effective as the people they are trying to help. A sincere 5% of this atmosphere won't get the job done when we think about rerouting outstanding policies which have become favorable to the administration. Much more needs to be said in regards to developing quality involvement in the efforts of the REACH Coalition, end quote. So in the context of Riverbend, there's a levels system which privileges well-behaved prisoners and denies those privileges to others. And from our conversations with St. Louis, we understand him to mean here that those who are privileged within this system are not willing to give up their status for the sake of solidarity with those who are not privileged by that system.
Okay, so now to kind of conclude in a way. So far, we've heard about the failures of the prison administration to respond to medical emergencies and its consequences. We've heard about the obstacles to and the need for building communities of resistance on the inside. Our next proposal, the Phone Tree Initiative, cannot respond to all of the dimensions of the problem of medical neglect and the obstacles to solidarity amongst prisoners that we've outlined here. However, it is a measure that offers a novel response to systemic medical neglect in Riverbend Prison. The phone tree is an attempt to create a network of advocates that will respond in emergency situations for incarcerated people in need of medical care at Riverbend Maximum Security Institution. By signing up on our phone list, you'll be asked, in emergency situations, to call the prison between the hours of 9 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. once every 2 hours to inquire about the medical conditions of a particular individual at Riverbend. Ron Cawthorn, who has access to all the pods in Unit 2, will be heading the initiative and will be our main contact for the phone tree. He will place a call to us, and we will contact you to begin calling on behalf of the person in need of care. As Ron, Donald, and others have stressed in their comments today, the more attention and concern expressed from persons on the outside, the more pressure this will put on the prison administration and staff to respond to the situation. If you are interested and willing to participate in the network of advocates, indicate this on the REACH sign-up sheet by checking the appropriate box. Andrea and I will contact you via email with a simple set of instructions to inform you of what to do if you should receive a text call from us to begin phoning in. Many thanks. And if you have any questions, feel free to let us know.